If you have video, you almost certainly have volume. Alex says we had a group member attempt suicide 2 weeks ago. Anything special we can do to support this person? Mainly just find out what they're doing to get loved and ask them if they want to do more. You can't make somebody get better, but you can at least say, so what would you like to do so that this doesn't happen again? Clearly, I mean, you don't need to say how do you feel because the people who are depressed and attempting suicide feel pretty bad. But you can say, so what do you want to do about it? Do you want to talk to more people in the group? You might extend yourself, for example, and say, would you like to set up a time for each day this week to speak to somebody in the group? Because many people who are alone and empty, they just don't have the courage and the wherewithal to reach out and contact people. So sometimes we have to help them. And it may be that if you say to this person, you didn't really say him or her, but so if you say to this person, would you like to, I'll be available on Monday night at 7 o'clock. Is that something you want to do? Don't push them to do it, just ask. Anybody else here in the group be willing to speak to this person on Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever. The more contact you get with loving people, the more full you tend to feel. I would assume that this person also is getting seen by a psychiatrist if they attempted suicide, so you'd stay out of the psychiatric treatment, but it certainly wouldn't be considered intrusive if you would at least ask. You might say, for example, would you be willing, would you consider it intrusive to have us ask when you come here to group whether you're taking your medication? By the time people get suicidal, they pretty much guaranteed that they're on something. Would you be willing to have us ask that question? That's not too intrusive to ask. And if whoever it is, he or she says, no, I don't want you to ask me, well, then you don't. But at least you've asked. So you're really just kind of finding out what kind of support, what kind of questions, what kind of love that person will tolerate and accept. And that could be a big support to that person. So, you don't get all moony and sympathetic. You're just offering more love. We just did a seminar in Dallas, and that was delightful. We had people from all over, and people who've been doing real love for years and years, and many other people, most of the people, in fact, in the room, who were new to it. A couple of people who arrived and hadn't read a thing, so they were just as brand new as you can get. And it was fun to watch. As you might expect, there were some people initially who were skeptical, and then who grew into it. There were others who knew a lot about real love, who found yet additional insights that helped them and got them excited. And it's a process that you can be excited about and grow in for your whole life. One lady who's been doing this for at least a couple of years came up and said, I just realized today, after 2 years of this, she said that my whole life has been a lie. Even in real love, she's been still earning everybody's love. So it takes whatever it takes. Giving up a life of lies is a hard thing to do. If we've been lying long enough, it's pretty hard to change that direction. And it takes a lot of love and support, and sometimes even a kick in the head to help us to quit it. Some of us need a really strong wise man or woman in a group to say, do you realize that you're still lying? Do you realize that you're still manipulating? That you're still controlling people? That you're still, whatever? You can't make somebody see it. But sometimes to allow somebody to continue with a getting behavior or protecting behavior that's destroying them is pretty neglectful and actually unkind on our part. And yet most of us are afraid to confront somebody, because most of the time when we confront somebody with their behavior, they don't say thank you. It's a scary thing for us to do. Hey, Karen here, who says Mother's Day is coming up. And I was invited to a little get-together for my ex-mother-in-law. Why not? These days, family relationships are getting so messy that it's like my which ex-mother-in-law? My fourth ex-mother-in-law? I haven't heard about anything going on with my son. I actually asked him, and he said he didn't know what his wife had planned. They aren't required to do anything. I'm such a huge people pleaser. I'm afraid to say yes to one invitation while I wait to see if my son has something planned, because I'm afraid he and his wife will be insulted. It does get kind of crazy, doesn't it? How much more could they not love me? Yeah. You know, what I would do is accept the invitation. And then if your son says, oh, at the last minute, because your son's kind of prone to that, as you described to me, then at the last minute, if your son says, oh, Mom, let's do something on Mother's Day, then it's up to you. It's up to you whether you cancel what you've planned and go and do something with your son, which is probably what I would do. Even though he'd done it last minute and he was being a bonehead, I'd probably still go do something with him. Or if he was obviously doing it just sort of like, well, I guess we have to, then I'd say, oh, gosh, too bad, I wish I'd known, and I'd still go to the event that I'd already been invited to. The cool thing is, when you don't feel pressured and obligated, you just make your choices. And in real love, one day is just like another, isn't it? We make this great big deal about, birthdays, Mother's Day, Christmas. Every day is an opportunity to be loving, feel loved. Why would one be more important than another? So you decide what you feel like doing. Do that. And feel no guilt. And then if anybody says to you, either your ex-mother-in-law or your son or anybody, but it's Mother's Day, don't let these people pluck at your heartstrings. You just say, oh, I know, and I've decided to blank. No guilt. And if you're not drawn into the guilt, they won't keep pulling you. I've noticed this over and over in my life. If people try to jerk, the only reason people keep jerking you around with guilt is because, pay attention, it works. People don't do what doesn't work with you. I mean, well, some people do it actually for a while, but they tend to quit it. And so you just go, no, I've decided to do whatever. And after a while, they're going to be, this is boring. It doesn't work with her. Catherine and Martha. I have a friend who is contemplating suicide. Any suggestions for the best way for me to stay a true, unconditionally loving friend? I can see I want to change his mind, but usually that isn't the best route to take. This is all very new information. So, remember, it's all about loving them. So, a friend says to me, I've been thinking about killing myself. I'm not going to respond with, oh, don't do that. What's the first thing I'm going to do? Love him or her. So what's the most loving thing you can do with somebody who says to you, I want to kill myself? Well, they just told you something with their lips, something important. Most loving thing you can do is listen. And so you might say, well, as miserable and painful as life often gets, Why wouldn't you want to kill yourself? In your particular case, what has brought you to that place? Now look what you just did. You listened. And this person very likely is going to be in a position of now like, wow. And they're going to pour their heart out to you because you're listening. Then as they tell you why they want to kill themselves, which comes down to I don't feel loved almost every time, you could say, boy, I sure understand that place. I've been there. I have felt miserable and unloved a million times, and there have been times I've thought life wasn't worth living either. Even if you haven't felt like killing yourself, you can at least say, I sure understand why somebody would feel like that. And you know, I have found some things that have made a real difference to me. If you want, I'll tell you about them. Or, if you want, I'll just sit here and listen to you. What would you rather? No agenda. No, I'm trying to get you to anything. Very often, one of the reasons that people get to the place wanting to kill themselves is that nobody's listening to them and everybody's trying to control them. And so then they tell you they're trying to kill themselves, and what do you say? What we tend to say is, oh, no, don't do that. Well, if anything, we've just made them more likely to kill themselves. So it's listening and loving them. That's what they need. Somebody asked me from the Arizona seminar, do you think women should stay with female coaches and men with male coaches as they start working on real love changes? Usually, but the real issue is just an absolute elimination of sexual attraction. So if you've got a 21-year-old girl and she can have as a coach some experienced old nasty looking raggedy grandpa like myself, and she feels no sexual confusion and feels cared for and loved, cool. If you've got a lesbian, for example, who tends to feel sexually distracted by conversations with women, well then she'd need a man as a coach. So it's really about the sexual distraction. That's what you need to avoid. And so in the beginning, anything that could cause any kind of sexual problem, even just a little bit of distraction, get rid of that. And so that's the real point to pay attention to. Catherine and Martha, I obligated myself to play for a recovery group tonight. I have not been able to be as planned as I'd like and didn't get the songs off in time to be on the PowerPoint. I put thoughts in my mind that I wanted the group's happiness and that they could just enjoy 2 of the songs. Luckily, I had one printed and copied for them. I'm with a real love friend and will ask to get filled, but I'm realizing that playing for groups empties me. Even when I regularly played in the praise band at church, I felt the same way. If I continue to feel this, should I just stop playing because I don't feel loving? I'm such a performer. We discussed this last week too. I would. I mean, early on in your trying to change your life to one of real love, I would avoid doing anything, everything avoidable. I mean, when I say anything, I mean, like, for example, raising a child drains you. And so you can't just, if you're early in the process of learning real love, sell off your children. Although that's a tempting thought. So there's some things that you can't avoid. But anything avoidable that drains you of love, get rid of it. So like in my first year of recovery, I didn't speak. I went to meetings. When I called people, I offered my opinion about absolutely nothing. And see, in your case, singing, doing music, is a form of speaking. It's a form of contributing and earning praise. For me, it was speaking and telling people what I knew. So I didn't do it. I didn't do it at all. Nothing. It was very helpful. It was very helpful for me to discover that I could have relationships with people without earning anything. People didn't know what I did for a living. They didn't know whether I knew anything. I just listened. I talked about my mistakes. I just shut up. I mean, in one recovery group that I went to, my best friend for a year was the guy who was leading the 12-step group. He was a garbage man. No kidding. Owned his own garbage truck and went around the county where we live and picked up private garbage or garbage at people's houses in the area where the city and the county didn't reach. So, way out in the countryside. He learned to read English, his first language, by reading the big book, the 12-step AA recovery book. That's despite having, gone to school. Very uneducated, illiterate man, and I didn't care. He didn't know what I did. So yeah, I'd avoid anything that distracted me and gave me any source of praise or stressed me. You need to feel loved. So up to you, but sounds like a cool plan. Alex mentions that she's losing connection, so if there are other people that are losing it, say something. I think she might be alone in that, but if I say she, it could be a he. Alex? Yeah. So if other people are having trouble with connection, say something. In Phoenix, gosh, we had just lots of great questions and people just contributing just right and left. Let me read a letter that I got from a man on an email the other day. In fact, he's here in the room with us. He said, this weekend I spent some time with my parents, and this is John. Hey, John. What an eye-opening weekend. He said, I was driving with my parents and my son to, get something to eat, and I picked up some trash in the back seat where my son sits in his car seat, and while I was walking to take it inside, my father saw me, and his dad was trying to make his life a little easier, so he opened the garage door so he could drop it in the trash can in the garage. He said, you would have thought that my father had just shot somebody. My mother, with a voice that conveyed, you are such an idiot, said, what are you doing? You're letting all the cool air out of the garage and letting all the hot air in. How many times have I told you about that? Then on top of that, a face and body language that radiated both anger and I can't believe how stupid you are. Now, this is where John gets beautifully honest. This is so cool. He says, 6 months ago, I would have agreed with my mother. I would have been in the camp that would say, people got to use their heads. I mean, why would somebody open a garage door in the middle of the hot afternoon sun? That's beyond me. Dad, you got to think before you act. You're wasting all that electricity. Worst of all, I would have thought that if I was correcting you like that, I was loving you. I was showing you how to save money, how to be responsible. I stood there with my jaw flapping in the breeze because I saw exactly how I have treated my wife and my son and other people in my life. Without real love, I don't think I would have ever seen this because I would never have had a chance to tell the truth about myself. Without knowing it, I was conveying to the world that they were idiots for doing anything that I didn't think was right. I thought I was so loving to people, but instead, I was just a controlling ass. Wow. Later that afternoon, when I was talking to my father alone in the truck, I told him what I'd seen. And he said, yeah, I've been putting up with that with your mother and putting up with your mother for 48 years. I was speechless. He said, I'm just more laid back than some other people, and I can put up with your mother's behavior, but your ex-wife couldn't handle those behaviors from you. He said, so, I just put up with it from your mother. I know she's not going to change, so I just let it go in one ear and out the other. My father made the choice to alternately live with the pig and like it, and then sometimes live with the pig and hate it. Whereas my ex-wife chose to leave the pig. I never saw myself as the pig. That is such a beautiful piece of honesty. How often do we see ourselves as the pig? Though it is unconscious, and I don't blame my mother, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So bit by bit, I just keep learning. I mean, that is so beautiful. We learn so much when we can tell the truth about us and not just tell the truth about everybody else. So, nice little piece of wisdom. Same man is writing right here, right now. Catherine and Martha say, you're blurry. Most people say I'm ugly. I've never been called blurry. Today my ex called, John says, and left a message that she wanted to talk. When I finally called her, she wanted to tell me that she was buying a new house and that she was excited. Now, I could go into where she got the money to buy the house, but that's not the point. Good for you. The point is, I realized that while at one point in time I thought I had it all, the wife, the big house, the fancy cars, and all the toys, I now understand through these principles that all of these possessions did not make me happy. Is it blurry?
I don't know, let me see what I can do.
Is it clear on your TV?
It could be clear, but
okay.
I don't remember what TV.
They were just substitutes for the emptiness, fear, and loneliness. I smiled after the call. It's funny how things change. When we met, she had nothing, and now I have nothing, but I have the most important thing I could ever have to offer my son and all the people in my life. Unconditional love. Gee, no kidding, huh? I mean, I used to have just all kinds of money. I could afford to go anywhere, do anything, and buy anything. And now I'm out of money all the time. My credit cards are maxed out, and I'm having more fun than I ever had before. Karen says, when I have dinner with my son and family, the table is ruled by my grandson, Jack. I'll bet. When he doesn't want to eat, it becomes a battle. I just look at my plate and shut up because it's none of my business. What should I do when I'm watching the kids? How should I handle the food issue? I really don't like to make a big deal about food. So, that's entirely up to you, what you do. Especially, it partly depends on how often you take care of the kids. I mean, if you go over and visit and you are in charge of meals once in a blue moon, gee, why bother? But when it comes to food, forcing a kid to eat is like stupid. There are so many other things going on in life. Teaching them how to be loving, teaching them to be responsible, teaching them to do their chores, teaching them not to hit each other, teaching them to listen. That making a kid eat his peas, by comparison, seems like an enormous waste of time. The kid is not going to starve to death. And if the food that was prepared was not balanced, give him a vitamin. So if you're there just once in a while, I just don't worry about it. So apparently this one guy's, he says his screen's clear, Jonathan. So, good work. So I'm with you, Karen. I wouldn't make a big deal about the food. It just ain't worth it. Now, if a kid said, I'm not going to eat any of my peas, I'm not going to eat any of my beans, I'm not going to eat anything healthy on my plate, and all I'm going to eat is 3 plates of ice cream, if you're with them all the time, I might say, the kids who eat their food, eat dessert, because dessert's not part of dinner. You could do that, but, whatever. Is it worth it as a grandmother to make a ruckus with kids? Probably not. Here's another letter from John. I love these letters from John. He has such great comments. He said, I've had daydreams throughout my life where I'm a hero or a person rushing to be with a loved one that's just been injured. From a real love perspective, I see the hero dreams as the need for imitation love. By his or her actions, the hero is always praised and loved. One unselfish action and everybody loves the hero. Pretty much the same thing with going to the aid of an injured loved one. You rush to the aid of somebody who's injured. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but sure you have. I mean, like if somebody's injured on a plane and they say, is there a doctor on the plane? I've been there on several occasions where I've raised my hand and said, sure. Everybody on the plane looks at you like, oh, thank you. Oh, wise and beneficent one. And I'm going, look, I'm just going to go see what I can do. I mean, in the old days, I thought that was pretty cool. Now I'm like, but everybody thinks you're very cool to go and offer aid to somebody who's injured. It's a real hero deal. And when you go to the aid of an injured loved one, even in a daydream, look what you get. Our loved ones very often have a lot of things against us, things we've done, mistakes we've made. You go and to the aid of an injured loved one, and at least in that moment, all your sins are forgiven, aren't they? Poof! Suddenly you're pure and clean. It's very cool. You get all the praise for being helpful and kind and loving, and no matter what else you're like the rest of your life, in that moment, you become a loving person. And now because of all that you're doing for them, remember, it's a trading of imitation love, they have to love you. I mean, if you go to the aid of an injured person and let's make it extreme. You bandage up, a bleeding wound. I mean, who now could possibly dare to turn to you and say, did you pick your socks up off the floor? Oh, no. You got them. They have to treat you nicely now. So the daydream of going to somebody who's injured, duh. I mean, you get just enormous rewards from that. And then you were wondering, what should I do about these daydreams? Should I stop them? Should I? You'll have them, from time to time. If you want to indulge them for a few minutes, whatever. It's kind of like, if you were having them all day long and you sat there and ruminated in them, that's probably not real helpful. But they're going to pop into your head. It's like having sexual thoughts. They'll pop into your head, but what you do with them is up to you. And entertaining them and nurturing them, that gets unhealthy. So John is saying, I'm still having a hard time with my 3-year-old son hitting me. Do you have any suggestions for consequences? Happens in different situations. Sure. So your 3-year-old hits you and you're, say, out at the store. You immediately say, oh, well, we don't hit people. Do you remember we talked about that? You're saying this to him. You say, we don't hit people. And do you see anybody in the store hitting anybody? No. Well, if an adult hits people, they take him to jail. Do you know why they do that? Because you can't be around other people if you hit them, because they don't like it. And if somebody keeps hitting people, then we have to put them where they can't hit people. They get this. 3 years old, he gets it. So if you're in the middle of a store, you stop immediately what you're doing. If he's having fun, all the better. And you take him out and you sit him in the car. You put him in his car seat. And you just sit there. Even better, if you buy an ice cream cone on the way to the car and you sit outside the car and eat it while he sits in his car seat. He needs to catch on that when you hit people, you don't get to be around other people, because that's the law. Adults don't get to do it, and you don't either. Let's say he's in the house, and it's getting close to time to watch TV or something. Then you say, oh, well, you're going to have to go back to your room and Stay there until you figure out a way not to hit people, because only the people who don't hit people can be out here with everybody else. Do you understand that? No anger. There can't be any irritation. But we don't do that. It's not allowed. You can be messy. You can be foolish. You can do any number of things that affect you. But you don't get to harm other people. That's when they put you in jail. That's when they fine you. That's when they say, oh, oops, your rights are suspended. And you can explain that to him in child language. Easy. Haley. Weekend in Dallas was great. I'm tickled. My brother called last evening, pretty distressed about some developments in the demise of his marriage. I found myself listening keenly and letting him know that I'm here, resisting the urge to fix it. Good for you. His 3 kids are grown now and doing well. So that was good to hear him conclude. He's been dealing with his wife's alcoholism and depression, let's see, for about 3 years. She keeps escalating. Later in the call, he asked about my updates, so I shared with him about the seminar. He accepted my offer to send him the Real Love book. Any other helpful coaching on being able to just love him through this? Oh, yes. So, you're not going to tell him what to do, but it's very helpful because you got to remember, she's depressed, she's an alcoholic. It's only natural that he'd be racked with a combination of guilt and anger. And if he can get the picture, partly from the book and partly from you talking to him, and you say to him, I don't know his name, John, she's drowning. And you didn't put her in the pool. She's been in the pool probably from the time she was a little kid. She uses the alcohol to dull her pain. You know, she's been depressed from a lifetime of pain. And, you know, you can do the best you can to love her, but you may not be capable of lifting her out of the pool. Who knows? So, do your best, buddy. Love her as well as you can, but there's no sense you taking on the burden of her pain. You didn't cause it. And then the more that you just listen to him, the more he'll tell you about how he feels. After he reads the Real Love book, if he says, gosh, that was really helpful, the Victim book would be good. Because people who are alcoholics and who are married to alcoholics, there's usually an enormous victim component just swimming around between both of them. So you offer him as much as he's willing to hear. And at each stage you say, well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. If you're interested in more, it's been helpful to me, but I have no need to push this on you. I'd share it with you if you want because I've found it helpful to me. But that's up to you. And I'm, here for you. And he's a cop. Oh, golly. So possibly, well, it's not true of all cops, but maybe he hasn't been as tender with her all these years as he could have been. So, but still, you tell him, where she is isn't his fault. As he reads the Real Love book, if he identifies that he has caused some of her pain, if he can identify that, then you say, yes, you have. And you're still not responsible for her drowning. You're responsible for not loving her as well as you could, and you could learn to do that. But you're still not responsible for her drowning, and you're not responsible for saving her. You're only responsible for becoming as loving as you can be. And you know that as you talk to him and you simply exude a feeling of peacefulness and not anxiety, you're going to make more difference to him than with anything else you do. You may have noticed that in the seminar, that people come up with these problems like, oh my gosh, this has happened and this, and the instant somebody responds with, Oh, wow. Well, what are we going to do? You just threw gas on the fire, made it much worse. We add fear to fear, and it just multiplies. So your peace, because that peace that you exude as you listen to him is loving him. Huge what you do with him. The atmosphere, the feeling that you give him. John was just saying that he thought he'd been too permissive with his 3-year-old. And of course, because we tend to be, with other people, especially with our kids, either too controlling or too permissive. And it's for the same reason. Fear. No kidding. If we're afraid our kids aren't doing the right thing, then we control them. We're afraid that we're going to look bad. If we're afraid our kids won't like us, won't love us, then we become permissive. And so, as a parent, you can't ever be afraid that your kids won't like you. You have to be willing to live through the times when they say, I hate you. If you're not willing to live with that, you can't be a parent, because they will hold that over your head. They don't even realize they're doing it. You don't either. But there's this implied threat. If you actually require that I live with a consequence, I won't like you. And so the parent goes, so they don't. And then what we've got is a spoiled, rotten kid, and everybody's unhappy. So you got to be willing to do the right thing, love the child, teach the child, impose consequences on the child, no matter what the child's reaction will be. Here's Martha, such a sweet woman. She says, I'm separated because she says, I left the pig, and then she quickly adds, and a pig left him too, me. Because, come on. When we leave the pig, aren't we all pigs too? That's very nice. We usually touch base once a month as friends, but I'm finding that I just can't listen to his victimization anymore. My therapist says, because I'm getting healthier, I found myself feeling that I should bring up areas in which I'm feeling like a victim, but it didn't feel good. If I told him the good stuff that's happening to me, it would make him feel bad. I listened for a while, but man, I can get into that pool quickly with him. I was able to finally pray for about 30 minutes until I could want his happiness. It was too late to call a real love friend. Good for you. Several things just kind of popped to mind, but you're recognizing that you have been as much of a problem in your relationship difficulties as he has. That's huge. Seeing him as a victim, big. You could read yourself the victim book just to understand him better. The victim book, Real Love and Freedom for the Soul, is that what it's called? Real Love and Freedom for the Soul? I think that's it. Is that the name of it? After you have too many books, you can't remember the names of them. Will help you a lot in learning how to respond to him and how to see him better. And remembering that you're not obligated to help him in any way. Listen to this. He has his own problems. And at this point, your biggest job is to learn to be more loving. So don't ever put yourself in a situation where you're required to be more loving or loving for longer than you're able. So when you find yourself going, oh, I don't want to listen to this anymore, you're done. You say, oh, I've got to go. Well, where do you have to go? Anywhere. Somewhere else. And I've told people that on the phone. Where do you have to go? Somewhere other than here. Don't stay longer, or you'll come to resent the conversations. You'll resent him. You'll find yourself doing what you had to do here, to pray for 30 minutes till you can even have the conversation or want his happiness. The more we see people as drowning, gosh, the easier it is to accept them. So those are a bunch of little things that come to mind, and good for you. You also bring up a great little point that sometimes we can't make a real love call, but we can tell the truth about ourselves to ourselves. We can say, gosh, I'm just not in a loving place, and if I'm not feeling loving, I'm wrong. We can meditate or pray and tap into a divine source of love. That's huge, because sometimes we can't make a call. So we're never helpless. There are things we can do all the time. Here's a lady from the seminar in Dallas who was just describing some of the things that she got out of the seminar. This is just one lady, one seminar. She said, I got to see real love in action as I saw people speak to each other about the situations in their lives. So reading about it's one thing, but seeing it eliminate people's anger and fear and solve difficult problems is quite another thing. Then she said, I got to meet real live people with whom I can further explore the concepts. I've been feeling isolated, not having anybody in my area to talk to about real love. The conference calls were great, but this was way better. Meeting people that I can now meet with and talk to on the phone. I was able to feel real love from people who were there, and to feel it for people who were brave enough to go up front and to tell the truth about their drowning. She said that was just very potent to me, that I could feel real love for other people. Because here she is early in the process of finding real love, and already as she's watching other people, she could feel herself loving them. Now notice, she's loving them 5 rows back, sitting in the audience. We can love people just by our caring for them. Doesn't necessarily mean we're actually doing anything. She said I became best friends with a particular lady that she was a roommate with there at the conference. The more time you spend with people and tell the truth, the closer you become to them. Let's see, she got some specialized real love guidance on a particular personal issue. She met enough people there that she became convinced that some of them would be willing to talk to her on the phone when she calls them. She talked to a lady at the seminar about the idea of starting a class at church using the DVDs, and got some sort of in-person coaching about how to do that. Let's see. And she got an answer to a prayer that she'd had about her brother, who has some pretty serious personal problems, and she talked to somebody at the conference who gave her not only some suggestions but offered to help with her brother. So, my goodness, here's one lady at one conference who got 8 or 9 different things out of it. So it's really good to exchange emails with each other. It's nice to read books about real love. But talking to each other on the phone is way better, to talk to real people live. And meeting with each other in person is 100 times better than that. So the more we can do that, the better. Here's a dad who says, the young kid that he was just talking about earlier, who's the hitter, just used the potty for a long time. Walked into my computer room to tell me that he's finished. I checked the toilet, and for the first time he used about half a roll of toilet paper. So we had some fun learning how much toilet paper to put in the potty. Just a learning opportunity. They don't do this stuff to be evil, We just need to teach them. Karen says, I was asked the other night if I loved my daughter-in-law, and I had to say no. Good for you. We spend our whole lives lying. Oh yes, I love everyone when we don't. I keep thinking that I've been doing real love long enough to be able to love people who don't love me, but not in this case. And I know it's me, not her. That's magical. you realize that you're not loving toward her because of you, not her. We all have a certain amount of real love, like as in this much. I'm making this up, obviously. And as long as the person that we're with only requires, say, this much, well, we're fine. But some people come along who, either they're more demanding, or they just have some personal little quirk, or they remind us of some person who hated us in the past, or they smell bad, or who knows? Doesn't really kind of even matter, frankly. But somebody comes along who, for some reason, we just find harder to love. They require this much for us to love them. We can't do it. And suddenly we discover that we just fall apart with that person. The tendency then is to think, see, I don't know how to love people. No, not true. You still have that much real love. All you learned is you don't have that much. So when we run into somebody that we are incapable of loving, somebody that kind of makes us fall apart, don't go straight to, I don't know anything. You just gained a piece of information. That's all. You just learned what you can't do. So, big deal. And the more that you practice loving people, the more love you get from other people, the amount you can love slowly grows, and eventually you can handle more and more people. Cool. That's cute. John was just telling me about an interaction that he had with his son, and his son was listening to me for a minute here on the headphones. Linda B., my ex recently made his monthly call, and I found myself confused about my reaction. Normally, we visit briefly about what's going on in our lives, talk over anything regarding the kids or joint plans, and then hang up. Our visits are usually friendly, but not intimate by any means. This time, I felt him reaching out more, and I found myself recoiling. The thought was, too bad, fella. I love the honesty here. You had the chance to work with me on our marriage, and you blew it. I'm not available to you as a close friend. Help me see what's going on here. Oh, that's not hard. Here you tried for, all these years. I'm assuming you were married to him for years. Most exes weren't, brief acquaintances for weeks. And you've had this just sort of, kind of like you get along relationship. And the more loving you become, the more into real love, the more available, the more sensitive, the more kind, you think he's not going to sense that? Of course he will. Everybody around you will. No kidding. And so as you do become more kind, more open, I've had people tell me after they've studied real love for, 6 months, 12 months, people come up to them in the store. They ask them more questions. Years ago, nobody came and approached me about anything. I would sit in an airport just glaring at the book I was reading or whatever, and nobody dared talk to me. I was in the airport in Dallas 2 days ago, and I'm just sitting there, I'm busy, but clearly I'm enjoying myself and feeling relaxed and peaceful. And this guy comes clear across the concourse there, and he says, my wife just bought me this computer, and I want to log on to the internet, and it's not configured or anything. He said, can you help me with this? There were people with laptops all over the place. There's something about when people feel loving, you can go, I'll bet he'll be nice to me. People can feel that. Ironically, because of the training that my sons have given me over the years, laughing at me and making fun of me, I actually configured his computer, which was stunning to me, and got him on the internet. But the point is, as you become more loving, your husband ex-husband is going to feel that. And like bees to honey is going to sort of want to, like, can I have a little of that? Please? And as he gets a little bit closer to you, it's only natural that you would begin to feel, because you're just learning how to do this, it's only natural that you would feel a little bit of like, go away. Because he's using you. He wants to drain you. He's not really participating in the real love process. He just wants to take from you. And you're not full enough where you want somebody to take from you. You know? Like a bike rider, who's riding along and somebody comes along to draft along behind them and take away from some of their momentum, and you're going, get away from me. So you're just feeling a little resentment that he wants to use up some of what you've now worked so hard to find. In time, you won't mind. So right now, what do you need to do? Do you have to love him? Or like you were suggesting, do you have to have intimate conversations with him? No! I mean, the instant you feel used or resentful, you just say, well, I've got to go. Stop the conversation. But as you feel capable of sharing more with him, then do that. But you aren't obligated to do spit. And as soon as we try to be more loving than we're able, that's when we start to goof it up and make mistakes. John said, my son just came back into the room and said, who is that guy? And he says, I gave him the headphones. And he listened to you and he said, I like that man. and really what the boy is saying is, there's something about that message that makes sense. There's something not tense. There's something accepting about it. And kids recognize that. I had a mother call me from Canada once, and she said, that she read the first chapter of the Real Love book to her, I'm pretty sure he was 5-year-old. And the first night she read the book for, I don't know, like 4 or 5 pages. Now, the parenting book is written at a pretty simple level, but it's not at the level of a 5-year-old. And after she read, the first few pages, she said, what did you think? And he said, well, she said, did you understand it? And he said, well, not all of it, but can we read it again tomorrow? And she read it to him the next day and the next day. And after several nights, she said, what you think? And she said, this little 5-year-old said, I love him because he understands me. That is so touching. This little 5-year-old child, because it's not about me, this little 5-year-old child could feel the meaning of the real love message. Because the subject of the first chapter is that children need to feel unconditionally loved. And here's this little 5-year-old going, that's it. That's what I need. That's what I want. What a cool thing to hear, huh? 5 years old. And this kid got it. Let's see. John says, if there are any lists that I could get on, to receive calls. No kidding. John, send me an email about that. I'm assuming that you're saying that you're ready to take phone calls from people. If that's the case, that would be highly cool. And if you're ready to do that, please send me that by email to remind me. And yeah, I'll give you some people that can call you. There's always more people who need to make calls than there are people who can take them. Martha says, last week you gave me some good information on being more loving to the teachers I work with, as they were not wanting to award students. Yeah, I remember that they probably didn't get anything when they were young. I was able to overlook their stuff and just be loving. I think they expected me to withdraw, but I didn't, and they became more loving. Real love melted monsters. That's just touching. And it's also consistent. I mean, when somebody does something that we don't think is loving, and then we go, well, what do you think's going to happen now? They're not going to become more loving. It gets way worse. So way to go, Martha. Thanks for sharing that with us. That's cool. Linda B says, I think part of it was that I felt myself starting to entertain thoughts. This is the lady who was talking about her ex-husband wanting to get closer to her. I felt myself starting to entertain thoughts of me maybe being drawn back to him, and I got scared. Yeah, maybe so. Although it was his final choice to end the marriage, I can see now what a mess it was. I was selfish and controlling and grasping for what I wanted. I don't suppose I ever knew exactly what he wanted, so I really don't want to revisit that relationship. And you don't have to. So that's a very cool thing about real love, is that the more unconditionally loving you become, the more decisions you can make without feeling manipulated or controlled. The more loving we are, the more real power we experience. People who feel unconditionally loving actually say no more than people who don't feel loving. People who don't feel loving feel manipulated and say yes when they don't mean it. Whereas loving people just go, no, I don't want to get involved in that. And then they're done. You don't have to needle and wheedle them. So, excellent point. It's been delightful, as always, being with you all. So I look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. Please bring your friends. The attendance has been just delightful. And bring your questions with you, and we'll see you next Tuesday. And between now and then, it's always about real love. Good to talk to you.